Nate Silver tweeted something that I find absolutely fascinating, and it should really, really humble you because it paints a picture that's a little bit different from the one that has been force-fed to us for months now. So he says, estimates of the polling error in swing states, making educated guesses about what the final numbers will look like in states that aren't done counting yet. So this is how the polls swung coming into Election Day. So in other words, the average of the polls and then what the actual votes were. Wisconsin, Trump +8. He overperformed the polls by 8 points. Iowa, Trump +7. Florida, Trump +6. Michigan, Trump +5. Texas, Trump +5. Ohio, Trump +5. New Hampshire, Trump +4. Maine, Trump +3. Pennsylvania, Trump +3. North Carolina, Trump +2. Nevada, Trump +2. Minnesota, Trump +2. Virginia, Trump +2. Arizona, Trump +2. New Mexico, Trump +1. Georgia, Trump +1. Colorado is the only one that was Biden +1. The only one. Even though Joe Biden won this election, and don't get it twisted, he did, Trump still had a 2016-style surge in the polls. He outperformed his polling numbers in a gargantuan way. That absolutely should humble you, for sure. Now, why? How did this happen? That's the question. And I've seen some speculation on it. I don't know how much I buy the reasoning that I've read. So some people are saying it has to do with lockdown, COVID lockdown, and people being inside, and a lot of liberals were bored, so they were doing more polls and surveys than conservatives were. That seems like a feeble excuse to me. Honestly, the more likely scenario, in my opinion, is that there really is just a perpetual shy Trump vote. That there's some percentage of Trump supporters who just won't tell pollsters that they support Trump for whatever reason. Maybe it's the social circle that they're in. They're afraid of how that's perceived and how that comes across. I mean, there's a number of reasons why you could be a shy Trump voter, but, the phenomenon that makes sense to me is that there's just a perpetual shy Trump contingent. Again, it's not enough for Trump to win the election, but it certainly was enough for him to have a 2016-style surge. See, the difference is Hillary had a 4-point cushion going into Election Day in 2016. Biden had an 8-point cushion. So if he had just a 4-point cushion, President Trump would have gotten reelected. But he had an 8-point cushion, so it's enough for him to win and win with 306 electoral votes. But the margins in the states that he needed are slimmer than everybody thought they were going to be. I told you guys, I looked at the polls. I thought they accurately adjusted from 2016 and that the polls were going to be spot on because the polls were spot on in the 2018 midterms. So I thought that they nailed it and it would be 351 electoral votes for Biden. I said worst case scenario, 320 for Biden. The final number is going to be Biden 306. So he's going to underperform what I thought was the worst case scenario. And Nate Silver is detailing for us, hey, here's how everything swung going into Election Day, the polling average versus the actual votes. And it really is astonishing. It really is astonishing. So he did what he did in 2016 and it just wasn't enough to win. There was that pro-Trump surge and it just wasn't enough to win. This is really incredible. And listen, I do also say, this part is obviously just my opinion, but I think that, something like this happening, I'm not surprised about because it's not like Biden and the Democrats were running good campaigns. And by the way, the Democrats did horrendous when it came to the House and when it comes to the Senate. There were 75% chance they were going to take the Senate. They're probably not going to take the Senate now. Abysmal. But Joe Biden wasn't really running on anything. He was hiding. Now, hiding was not a bad approach. It's possible that if he campaigned more, he would have lost, because then people would see how much he's in cognitive decline. So that may have been the right strategy. In fact, I was calling for him to do that the entire time. But in terms of the actual substance of what they were campaigning on, I mean, the best part about it was just we're better on COVID. That was the most salient argument coming from the Biden camp. But outside of that, listen, we're in a pandemic, and they're not even for Medicare for all. They're not even for universal health care in the middle of a pandemic where tens of millions of people are losing their insurance. I mean, that's, unforgivable. Not running on Medicare for all, not running on abolishing student loan debt, not running on a Green New Deal or a New Deal, colossal infrastructure project. It really was the half-measure campaign, the corporate campaign, the let's go back to normal campaign. Now, again, that was enough, but in some ways, this is the perfect way for it to unfold, because it shows you that there really are hard limits when you don't really believe in anything. When you don't really believe in anything and your campaign is, I'm not that guy, that's only going to get you so far, because everybody can kind of sense how full of shit you are. Everybody can kind of sense that there's nothing at the core of what you're arguing for. There's nothing there. There's no there. It's just like, yeah, this guy's really bad, right? Yeah, I mean, he is really bad. Okay, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? You have no other option. What are you going to do? So he did it, man. Trump did it. Trump had that 2016 style surge. Trump massively outperformed the polls. And, I was reminded of a tweet from Sean King, and he was like, people were making fun of me for this, but I mean it in all seriousness. Whatever the polls are for Trump, add 4. Whatever the polls are for Trump, always add 4, nationally and in the respective states. Kind of turned out to be exactly right. And he was saying this before the election, and then he said it on the election. He's like, look, this is my rule. My rule is you add 4. They just couldn't account for that entire shy Trump vote. Now, what do you do moving forward? See, that's a difficult question. That's a difficult question because, I mean, if Trump's no longer on the ballot, and actually generic Republicans outperform Trump, right? But if Trump's no longer on the ballot, do you have that same kind of shy Republican vote phenomenon? I don't know. What I can tell you is, in previous elections, the polling was more accurate. So Nate Silver, he very famously got, I think it was the 2008 states exactly right, and the 2012 states only got like 1 or 2 wrong in the presidential election. Or maybe it was vice versa. Maybe it was 1 or 2 wrong in the 2008 race and then everything right in 2012. Like, he got everything pretty much spot on. And, it's been harder to predict in the Trump era because you got to have the correct model. So the issue could be with your premise up front. If you accept the premise, then, everything that follows from it is going to be accurate. But the issue sometimes with the premise. And I think what they did is they adjusted for education level, which they didn't have in 2016. And they used the 2016 turnout numbers for 2020, which again should have been a more pro-Trump correction. But whatever the correction was, it wasn't enough. And just so everybody knows, Trump actually expanded his vote share in 2020. So 4 years of Donald Trump and all the colossal mess and everything going to hell and the terrible decisions he made, governing like a standard establishment Republican, doing tax cuts for the wealthy, deregulation, continuing the wars. After 4 years of Trump expanded his vote share. And interestingly enough, where he really made his gains? Among minorities. It was, some gain among black people, but more gain among Latinos and women too. There was, he turned out more in terms of women. He lost among suburbanites. So basically the older, upper middle class white suburbanites, like in Arizona, for example, in the Sun Belt, they broke for Biden more. So he lost among his core constituency and gained among minorities, interestingly enough. And again, increased his vote count. He got, aside from Joe Biden, obviously, who's winning the popular vote by millions, he got the second most votes in U.S. history. More than Obama 2008, more than Obama 2012. Now, population, I'm sure, has gone up since then, so, I'm not sure if that's exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, but this is a phenomenon that we need to think about, and it's not going to go away. And you can't just act like, well, they're all racist, they're all sexist, they're all bigots. So swat them aside and let's move forward. No. We have to really study this, understand it, so we can adjust accordingly moving forward. Because it's real. This stuff is real as a heart attack. He outperformed the polls yet again. And so, the smug liberal arrogance is not an asset to the left-wing project or even the Democratic project. So, there you have it, man. Really is a wild story. Really is a wild story. He had the 2016 style surge. He outperformed the polls. Just wasn't enough to get him across the finish line. And we're going to have to contend with this. And pollsters are going to have to look in the mirror. And the Democrats are going to have to look in the mirror to figure out how to stop this decline. And the reality is, again, when your whole message is just, I'm not that guy, that's only going to get you so far. And it was far enough, but it's not as far as it should have been.